What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the third album by Miami-based rap group Two Live Crew. Basically, this project is called As Nasty as They Want to Be, and it came out in the winter of 1989. The thing about this particular project is this is an album here that was pretty controversial back in the late 80s when it came out as far as this pitch is going to happen. Basically, like where they were from in Florida, the Southern District of Florida, the district court tried to ban this album from being sold and tried to declare it illegal and pitches like that had a lot of controversy. Had a lot of controversy around that time. Was one of the bigger household names, one of the bigger rap albums to get some of that controversy. Apart from like NWA was Straight Outta Compton, some of those type pitches. But those are two big albums out of the late '80s that both had a lot of just overall had a lot of overall heraldment and just overall kind of back and forth as far as those particular pitches going to happen with just the app, just with like the ousting point of getting those displayed as far as those pitches going to happen, which is a pretty excellent concept here. This is also a project that had a lawsuit across it by George Lucas of Star Wars lore. I'd have to say it's a concept that originally this album was on like Skywalker Records, but they were sued by the Star Wars company from being able to use that particular name. So it's just some concepts about this that just had some heraldments that kind of had it back and forth with just the concept of this album being able to display. So it was pretty much on probably on the news oftenly enough back in like the late 80s as far as those pitches can happen. But that rap was known kind of more for controversy in some of those pitches. You know, folks like Too Short, NWA, Ice-T, some of these type folks, Public Enemy, and Two Live Crew were some of these type folks that had a lot of that particular heraldment, but it was necessary just because the concepts is like the amalgamation, how things kind of fleshed out throughout the late 80s and 90s just kind of took that particular fold as far as those pitches can happen. But this is a pretty rock solid album here, I'd have to say. It is pretty retro. This is an album that's before like Dr. Dre kind of helped revolutionize some rap music sounds with the Chronic and Niggas for Life from NWA, some of those type pitches, and Doggy Style by Snoop Dogg, some of those type fares. So G Funk hadn't quite happened yet. For the most part, NWA was kind of in its early stages. This is definitely one that was kind of like a front runner and just an overall trailblazer for like Miami bass as far as those pitches can happen. I can't think of too many Southern hip hop artists that are older than Two Live Crew. I'd had to say. I want to say they're one of the originators. They had been around since at least 86 or 85, I'd have to say. So it's a good enough pitch to kind of get to some of these folks. Just look after just being able to know like the concept behind it. But yeah, and like critic reviews, this is seen as like a classic just based upon the impact and overall the lore that kind of went along with this particular record. But I do wind up enjoying most of this record. I realize the thing to know about this particular product is if you are younger within a sense, and by that I mean if you're born, like if you don't actively remember like Beastie Boys and folks like if you don't actively remember folks like Beastie Boys and Public Enemy, Kid Rock from like the early 90s, some of those type pitches, other folks like, you know, NWA and like you know, Ice-T, some of these type folks just in particular. And I admit I don't full blown as much full bound know the ins and outs entirely of like the golden era hip hop between like the mid 80s to about the early 90s. But I look after this, it's pretty retro just to be able to, it's just something to know going in within the appeal behind it. That this is a very good album, but it's just swashed in like the retro kind of throwback feel when rap music and like the production feels more in like its early stages. So if you're a beat head, you definitely appreciate more like glossy type beats, you know, anything past like G Funk, some of those type ones. This one it started to flesh out more. This is not one of those records, but I mean, it's not like it's bad production. It has the glimpses of it, and it definitely just an originator of that particular sound of being able to do it. It definitely has some good samples and overall ideas just from the pitch. Pretty revolutionary to kind of get. It's just kind of concept that it's it's just a retro kind of throwback type one. So yeah, there were four singles on here, but for the most part, the biggest song, and this continues, this is Two Live Crew's most popular album. This album went platinum at least, which is a pretty good pitch behind that. It's still relatively under, let's say platinum 35 years later is relative. Let's say platinum 35 years later is underpopulated as far as those pitches going to happen. But this album was basically based upon the popularity of Me So Horny, which was a pretty good trended meme type song to kind of get as far as those pitches going to happen. Definitely has the appeal behind it, but that's really about the only true hit single off this particular record. It did have at least four singles, but most of these, that was the thing about most of the like rap albums from like the 80s and 90s and just pitches like that. You know, when you think of Vanilla Ice or MC Hammer or some of these type folks, Two Live Crew or NWA, some of those type folks, they're really known for only about one or two songs per project, I'd have to say. I mean, Come On Babe is at least a decent one, but it just doesn't hold a candle to Me So Horny. Just the overall radio snap, that one. That was just kind of a bombastic kind of lightning in a bottle. It's not to say they don't have other hits, but this one just really stands out the highest. But to me, So Horny is a pretty excellent type one to kind of get here. It's like a glazed kind of golden summer evening pep. I would have to say about this one. It's like a good refresher for like end of work shift. I would definitely feel like this is like a good, it's like a great song to go cut loose at like a bar. I'd say so. It's a pretty good concept. Definitely some good pitches kind of get here. It's a good bop to kind of get this end of work shift. This pitches like that to switch to flip mode as far as that particular kind of goes. It's a good concept of this like in the hot summer air. A lot of this is pretty summer oriented. It's retro within a sense, but it has the concept of at least having that unwind and just being like, yeah, I'm gonna get some of this done. I mean, the thing about this particular song, "Me So Horny," is just the overall snap behind it, because this is just like this is basically like the "Baby Got Back" song before "Baby Got Back" kind of hit in like '92. I'd have to say just the particular type fare as far as that would kind of happen. I just kind of look after it, just like the cut loose kind of snap, and it's just kind of like a guilty pleasure type song to kind of get just within the affluence as to how that would particularly kind of happen. Basically, like a good song to. I feel like the difficulty of trying to replay this particular song, I think a lot of it just has to do with the meme type appeal behind it. It's just the affability, how many standard songs, like when you think of a song like from 2000s, like "This Is Why I'm Hot" or "It's Going Down," some of those type pitches that just kind of a lot of these particular hit songs, when rap songs would get one hit wonders, it just boils down to like the phrase that has to do with the popularity. When you look after it, like saying "Baby Got Back," and then you think of other singles by Sir Mix-a-Lot, it is because the affability of something being like slanguage or just a household name type word that you would say in commonplace conversation. "Me So Horny" is one of those type ones that has that particular snap. And I just think when rap songs don't get that, it just has less drive to be able to get it, which is unfortunate because this album is pretty excellent here. But it's just kind of the concept that, just I think the affability behind the meme type appeal of "Me So Horny" was just difficult to replicate. But I do think "Come On Babe" is at least a nice one. It's a good follow up, but it just doesn't have the casual type snap or the quotability behind it. That's just kind of what happens. But it is just a great refresher after end of work shift. Just the concept of just like the drive home, figuring out, like, especially if you're near water or near warmer territory, as far as those pitches kind of happen, just being able to say you can go pick up like some Malibu rums and pitches like that, some of those type pitches, and just be able to really get tore up and just have some good times just within the standard fare. Just some hot, just great for like June, July, August, I'd say. Then "Come On Babe" is a nice one. This is like a jivey kind of cut loose and unwind kind of retro dance club heat, I'd have to say. Definitely later at night than "Me So Horny," I'd have to say, but it just has less snap about it. So I just look after this particular one. This is a good type tune, but this one reminds me more of like Sir Mix-a-Lot, "Baby Got Back," just kind of the appeal where it's a good bop, but it just feels very vanilla for like standard rap type standards. I feel like this one, probably for the most part, I'd have to say maybe 40 out of 50 people probably would not find the affability behind the snap of this particular song. I do at least see the quotability behind "Me So Horny," some of those type pitches. It's a good 1-2 punch, but this is in a lot more thorough, kind of hardcore rap type territory. I just look after it as the same sort of humor and this overall like aesthetic as "Me So Horny," but it just doesn't deliver in terms of like the affability behind it. I mean, but that's kind of the concept as far as just having another quotable. But I do think they probably should have been given more room. But the two problems I would see with these particular type songs here is just the concept of just like the retro kind of production, just the "Me So Horny" just had more radio snap about it, just in terms of like the jivey kind of really feels like a song that you would listen to at like 4:45, just got done with work, or 5:15. Just the concept is like the sun is just golden out, just a real good glimmer. It's a nice one just to kind of get some drinks in your system and just kind of be able to go and cut loose for a bit. But this one in particular is more like at the heat of the night, I would say. Maybe not full blown midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, but definitely something like 8 o'clock p.m. when you don't have to worry about any more responsibilities or SFW type stuff. I'd say it's just kind of a concept, but this basically reminds me of like an '80s version of like something Sir Mix-a-Lot would have done with one of his club bobs. I just look at it as just the concept, but it is pretty vanilla. "The Fuck Shop" is the third single. This is a nice one as well. It's like a basic kind of summer midday commute. I would definitely feel like here is like a good vehicle companion to kind of get definitely for like some slow creeping around pitches like that. It's an '80s kind of pull up music, I would feel like here. What I mean by that is, pull up music when you think of trap music like Travis Scott, Migos, Future, some of those type folks, Yo Gotti, Meek Mill. This is like an '80s version, like pull up type music, just in a more summer day type sense. Knocks pretty well, but it's just kind of the concept that it really feels like some beachside and kind of shop type music. If you're just getting an oil change, something like that, some of those type fares, just kind of getting transmission fixed, something that relative type pitch. It's a good concept, kind of have some of that type fare, or just like some slow groove type creeping type. I was kind of get within like the hot air and pitches like that. Pretty nice one. Then "Coolin's" a nice one. This is the fourth single. Now, this is only released in Europe, which is unfortunate. I mean, obviously, it's 30 something years ago, but just within the pitch would have been a nice one to have gotten on the radio. This one has probably like the second most radio snap, I'd have to say. This probably could have been like a the second biggest song had it been promoted better. It's like a vibey kind of hot day, beachside and out and about kind of sauntering. I feel like about this one. This feels like a Pauly Shore film kind of backdrop here. Yeah, this basically feels like something you would have seen in like a Pauly Shore movie or like a Ray Liotta movie, one of those type folks, just within that relative type pitch. Is something that relative type fair, just a real beachside type pitch of just like, bringing a cooler with you in the vehicles, pitches like that, just having a few Coronas, something that relative type sense, just women with hella tans, some of those type pitches, just being able to say sunglasses music, shades music for sure, definitely. I'd have to say it's a real hot day, and I do appreciate the aspect behind it. I do look after some of these. When I listen to some of the southern rap I listen to, I definitely have to say the concept. This definitely has the affability of actually being at like a beach and just being able to say and stuff as far as those pictures would kind of happen to something that actually feels like you're gonna be amongst like folks playing volleyball and things like that, just playing with beach balls and just standard fare, just cool, beachside and hot weather and just pitches like that as far as like swimsuit type music and just overall suntanned and mojito type music and Malibu rum type music. I'd say it's just good concept. There's at least a few songs on here like Coolin' is like that. There's another one that's kind of like that on here. Like I feel like Put Her in the Buck is definitely like that, and I would definitely say that. Well, I'd probably say the Fuck Shop is kind of like that in a more cruising type sense, and possibly like, yeah, well, at least those three songs happen to be within that relative tone. But then Me So Horny is pretty good pitch for that as well. So I just would have to say, but yeah, I look after it. So basically, there's 18 songs in this particular album, but really there's only 16 songs because basically I Ain't Bullshitting. It's just a talking song. This just doesn't really have any rap vocals on there. It's just more interlude type vocals on there. And then Mega Mix 3 is just a poor instrumental that I don't recommend. So I'm not going to knock those songs. But basically, out of 16 songs, I wound up recommending 11. So I'll go ahead and recommend those 11. So they'd be Me So Horny, Come On Babe, The Fuck Shop, Coolin', Put Her in the Buck, Dick Almighty, Break It On Down, Get Loose Now, Get the Fuck Out of My House, Badass Bitch, and Reggae Joint. So basically, a pretty star-studded type one has one of the best beats on here. This is just a real great trip of a song to listen to. Is Reggae Joint. It's like a trippy kind of great tune to get hella torched on like a blitzkrieg kind of night. I would definitely feel like here is like an easy kind of head trip and summer night type fun to kind of get. So this one just has a lot of appeal. Even if it's trying to be like a satire of like reggae, even if it's trying to be like a satire of reggaeton type music, I feel like it's a pretty good overall bop to kind of get just within the tone. It's a great one just to be able to appreciate some getting torchness just to be able to have here. Just the overall glitziness. I'm not sure if like I know that Peter Tosh was at least a pretty thriving reggaeton type artist. He was like the second coming of Bob Marley in like the 80s. I mean, he passed in 87, but I realized he was at least a thriving type one. I know the after effects of him were kind of around in like the late 80s, but I just question who was really popping in like reggaeton music around this particular time, 89, 90, some of those type pitches that I'd say was just an excellent type concept, kind of get some of this type fare just within a pretty good pitch. I mean, there are some smoking type songs in here. I feel like this is just more beachside and just kind of the pitch behind just having like summer drink, something like that. But I look after this is like a nice one to kind of have for like some frat type fare. There's also some pretty good social house party type joints to kind of get on here. Badass Bitch is a nice one for that. It's like a vintage kind of 80s glam. Hey, Badass Bitch is like a vintage kind of 80s glam hangout hit. I would feel like here is like a sludgy kind of smoke a few Kickstarter for like a decent house party night to kind of get. It really feels like something ripped out of 1987, just like out of some 80s commercial, something like that. Feels like something you would have seen just within like stand. Definitely trendy to the 80s, but it almost, I don't want to say it feels cheesy, but it definitely feels like something that you would have seen like a television commercial from 87, 89, or 91. Some of those type pitches that I'd say. It says that standard sludge with this like 80s glam. I'd say it was good concept. Do appreciate the hangout type fare of this one. It's like a good one to kind of kick things off a bit. There are some good house party pops on here. Another one that's pretty good for that pitch is Get the Fuck Out of My House. It's like a tipsy and feel good kind of house party bopper. I'd feel like about this one. It's like a percolate and kind of vanilla stepper to kind of get here, and it's a pretty catchy type one. So this one has some of the most snap. This probably could have been a single if not for like the Verasive kind of name, I'd have to say, just within the pitch behind it. Let's look after it. Maybe they'd switch it to Get the Heck or Get the Hell Out of My House, something with the pitch. But this has some of the most bite on here in terms of like the most contemporary type production, I'd have to say. This one's probably one of the most immediate ones apart from Me So Horny and possibly like I would say Coolin' and Dick Almighty possibly. But some of these, I mean, the thing about this particular album is it is a pretty like, I don't want to say crass, but definitely it's just very like the vulgarity behind it is just more severe on this particular project. I mean, I think Obviously, the tone behind it is it's a pretty awesome type pitch to kind of get, but just within the tone, it's almost damning in the sense that it just did not have like the public relations factor to be able to get some of these songs. I mean, I appreciate the candor of this particular album, but I look after it in terms like making that affable to the point where it can get some casual type appeal. You look after it, most of these songs probably would not get like standard airplay. I mean, even nowadays, even saying the word horny feels like a word that you would censor. So there's just a lot of these on here that just right off the off front just feel like the concept of whether or not how it would get like casual kind of appeal. But it's not like I care. I look after there's plenty of songs on here, but just in terms of the sense of what you would be able to say for like casual type fare. And I'm not when I say casual type fare, I'm not talking clean type fare, just within the aspect of just not playing like the actual explicit versions. But this the concept of something that you would hear, something that you would hear that folks are gonna know apart from just like me so horny or something like that. But I definitely feel like Get the Fuck Out of My House is a pretty nice one. Has a lot of immediate factor. I do feel like Put Her in the Buck's a pretty nice one for that. And Coolin' is definitely that's a good single. That was a Europe only one. But yeah, speaking of Put Her in the Buck, this is a nice bop here. It's like a vintage kind of poolside and hot day stretch of a song I would definitely feel like here. It's a pretty great sample. This is another one that feels like a Pauly Shore kind of film backdrop, something like that. Something like something you would have seen feels ripped out of the movie Scarface. Some of that Miami kind of gleam, some of that Miami kind of glimmer, and just overall 80s seediness, like typical type fanfare in a more sunny type sense. It's like some classic kind of summer fun here. I'd say grab some brews and it's a good mingler to kind of get. And it's definitely within the excellent concept of it. I'd have to say Dick Almighty's a pretty nice bop to kind of get. It's like a bouncy kind of summer evening cruise around. I would feel like here. It's like a feel good kind of leftover 80s glitz. I'd have to say about this one. Just the concept of when I say leftover 80s, just the concept of some of that 80s glam, just within the concept of just having like a good trendy type one to just to feel your hair in the wind, some of those type pitches, just appreciate like the fast cruise, just appreciate like the fast cruise type atmosphere, and just appreciate like some summer evenings and just like some good cool breeze type atmospheres kind of get. And it's like this is also like some nice nightclub noise to kind of get here. So this one I heard a Nicki Minaj song that had a similar beat to this particular one. It's actually a Jay-Z song that had Foxy Brown on there. So this song sampled something. I don't know what particularly it kind of is, but I look after it's a pretty good sample on here. It just really feels like a good car bop to kind of get for like some bouncy type club type appeal. This is another one that has more immediate factor in terms of like the nightclub bounce. The production fair on this particular one just stands out more. This would have to say about that. But Break It On Down's a pretty quality one. It's like a vanilla kind of dance noise and city hop type tune to kind of get. This reminds me of some of the stuff that NWA was kind of doing like the mid late 80s, some of those type pitches just to be able to get. Just look after it's just like a standard kind of hop and bop, I'd say is like some good. It's a good album cut, I would definitely feel like, and it fills out like the night after like Me So Horny and some of those type ones like Put Her in the Buck, or some of those other type ones like Come On Babe and like Get Loose Now and Get the Fuck Out of My House, some of those type pitches, I'd have to say really has the affability behind it. This is probably one of the I do feel like Break It On Down's just one. I do feel like Break It On Down's just one of the more vanilla type ones. This is one that wouldn't have as much. It's not a bad song, but it just doesn't have as much immediate snap compared to some of these ones like Me So Horny. And yeah, just some of these more immediate type ones like Me So Horny and Get the Fuck Out of My House, I have to say. But it is a nice one. Get Loose Now is pretty quality one. It's like a get some drinks in your system kind of evening thrills. I'd feel like about this one. Pretty nice highlight here. It's like a peppier kind of in between kind of transit type music, just kind of car drivers pitches like that. Just get some stuff done. This feels like one of those scenes like an 80s movie where they put it in fast forward and they get all the tasks done, some of those type pitches. This is one of those songs where they probably got that reference from. This is like a good Finnish Aaron song to kind of get here. So it's just kind of a concept. It's a good one to get some drinks in your system, just within the pitch. It's a good song to get some drinks in your system, get some bills paid within the legality of it. But just the concept of just being able to say is just kind of one of those transit type ones, I'd have to say. Good pitch for that. And I think that basically covers every other song on this album I recommend, I'd have to say. So it's just kind of the concept. Yeah, so once again, some of the ones, if you are coming to this in like a not so much age where you're over the age of 40 or 45, some pitches like that, and you have less memory with these particular songs and albums, I'd say I would definitely say some immediate ones. Obviously, the best song on this album is Me So Horny, but I'd probably say some follow-up type ones where the production is at least more relative to like something contemporary that's not quite as archaic or like ancient, I'd have to say. I feel like there's some good appeal with Get the Fuck Out of My House. I feel like Coolin' has a pretty good sample on there. I feel like Put Her in the Buck is another summer type one, just kind of get for like some beachside kind of Malibu rum type sipping, some of those type fares, some good suntan and bikini weather as far as those pitches kind of happen. And I'd also say that Reggae Joint's probably one of the better smoking songs out of the 80s from rap music, I'd have to say. So it's just an excellent type concept. So some good fare there. And then Badass Bitch is a pretty good hangout type fare if you do like some of that cheesy kind of 80s glam, I'd have to say. So it's good pitch. That's just kind of the concept. So me recommending 11 songs out of 16 on here. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like an 8.25 out of 10. And I'll talk about some of these songs I don't recommend. Basically, the ones I don't recommend just have a lot more just kind of boom bap type rhymes that just don't overall have the affability. Like I feel like Dirty Nursery Rhymes. Despite the fact that this is a pretty relatively popular song on Spotify, I just didn't really appreciate the affability behind it. It was just too much like an archaic type production, just the overall fanfare behind it. I just don't the pitch behind making nursery rhymes kind of with like a more illicit type tone. Just I didn't see the pitch of like the catchiness full blown about it. It just didn't have as much. I mean, even if that would have worked, it just was not very sonically pleasing to kind of listen to. Two Live Blues is just kind of a blues type song. Just didn't appreciate that one as well. Just didn't have like the production type concoction that was really as affable. I mean, the thing about most of this album that the complaints about is just the fact that the production fair, because it's more archaic. So when you don't connect with some of these, it's just kind of the concept that yeah, it was kind of an originator and trailblazer, but it's just kind of the concept that some of these, not every single one of these songs hits in terms of like what they were trying to deliver with it. Some of these just kind of snagged the album more just because the concept that the more retro kind of production on here. My Seven Bizzos is a decent song. I do somewhat like the kind of warped kind of relatively similar production type fare to like the Fuck Shop, some of those type pitches, just in kind of an in-between type song that reminds me of the Fuck Shop and Badass. Reminds me of the Fuck Shop and Badass Bitch, I'd have to say, but it just didn't really deliver as well, I'd have to say. I just don't know how oftenly I would listen to this one. It's a good, decent story bop to kind of get here, just talking about Bizzos as far as those pitches kind of happen. Bizzos being chicas, I'd look after, but I just look after just being able to say, I just don't know the commonplace just because of the retro production fair as to how often I'd listen to that one. I mean, there's actually a good several of these songs were I to purchase this album, there's a number of songs I probably would listen to oftenly enough. I definitely feel like Me So Horny is a good highlight. I feel like Coolin's a pretty nice one. Badass Bitch is a pretty nice one. Get the Fuck Out of My House, there's some nice ones, but in terms of like the factor behind like, just songs more like My Seven Bizzos or some of these other type ones like, Dirty Nursery Rhymes or some of those type of pitches, it just probably wouldn't be as frequent. And there's also some songs on here, like there's a couple of these songs that just kind of feel like crowd pleasers and just move the crowd type songs, like If You Believe in Having Sex and then Fraternity Record, where they just kind of allow the crowd to kind of spit the lyrics as far as those pitches can happen. Just more house party type noise and just kind of more festivity, kind of I mean, I like the concept of the unification of it, but just the appeal behind these songs and the overall production fare is just not as catchy. They're just kind of, I mean, it just has like a good fanfare, just being something that just gets some good festive noise going, but it just doesn't really deliver upon the execution of it. So I just say those are some other ones I didn't recommend. But yeah, 8.25 score. The social score, that's kind of tricky. I think I'll give the social score like a 7.5 out of 10. I feel like this at least has some good bops on here. I do feel like there's some immediate ones I've listed. Definitely the lead single, Me So Horny, is an excellent type moment. It's a good, just solitary enough lesson to kind of get just in paying attention to like some of the original type feels of like Southern hip hop, some of those type pitches like Miami bass, but I just look after it. This album doesn't have a lot to back it up in terms of like another radio type hit. It's kind of like what happened with Sir Mix-a-Lot. He's just known for Baby Got Back, which is an excellent type song, but for the most part, when you try to recommend some of these other type songs to certain casual folks, they're just not going to pick up on much of it at all. It just kind of happens to be the thing. But there are some good gems on here, but it's probably likely it's going to be more of a battle trying to get folks to have the pay attention to some of these type songs that just don't have like the snap of like the single. I mean, it's at least one. I mean, if you do insist on liking Two Live Crew, it's at least good to get that Me So Horny. But for the most part, it just doesn't feel like there's much room for other kind of candidates as far as like some highlights apart from that. So that's just kind of the thing. But there are some good gems on here for folks that do remember the sound. This is kind of more retro and ain't or just kind of more retro and throwback. But in terms of the future, like the thing about like Two Live Crews, there's a number of these members that are deceased. So it's kind of the concept, and the other two members that are still around are like in their 60s or further as far as those pitches kind of happen. So I look after just within the pitch. There's some excellent concepts here. This is their highest selling in a lot of ways, seen as like their best album. I'd say I do definitely see some of the glamour about this particular project. It's kind of rough around the edges in some senses, but it is a pretty good project. And I do appreciate like the pioneer type sound that it had. So it's recommendable, but just to like a certain fault, I'd have to say, just within the concept of it.